Hi everybody, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. Topic of the week seems to be housing affordability, rightly or wrongly, and media likes to portray a national affordability crisis. I believe we don't have one. We may have one in Sydney certainly, but in terms of the national situation, there's a pretty good level of affordability around markets in other parts of Australia, and that's borne out by the latest figures for home loan approvals. We've seen a steady upward trend in the number of loans for housing that are happening around the country. The latest figures from the Australian Bureau of Statistics are for November. One of the standout features there is that the market share of first home buyers is continuing to rise. The latest figures have them at the highest level at any time in the last 5 years. And this is bearing in mind the Australian Bureau of Statistics actually undercounts the number of first home buyers that are out there. It has actually publicly admitted that on a number of occasions in the last few years. But even by their figures, and they're comparing apples with apples here, that the level of first home buyers that they're counting has been rising steadily for the last 12 to 18 months, and they're currently at the highest level as a market share of all home loans that they've been any time in the last 5 years. In fact, if I could just flash up in front of you the graph, the red line, you can see that this is the level of first home buyers as a share of total loans in the housing market. You can see the rising graph of their market share in the last 12 to 18 months. Primarily, I believe this is happening because the two markets which have had the worst problems with housing affordability, Sydney and Melbourne, the state governments in those two states have increased assistance for first home buyers in the form of grants and stamp duty concessions and other forms of assistance, particularly in Victoria, and that has helped to precipitate a higher level of buying by first home buyers. So we've had the latest figures from the Bureau of Statistics came out. Some of the media coverage of it, as is so often the case, has missed the point. There's an article out there on News Limited publications where it talks about cooling house prices as part of the equation. Well, certainly there's many markets in Australia where house prices aren't cooling. They're certainly going ahead very strongly in Canberra and in Hobart. In regional cities like Newcastle, Perth is starting to show growth for the first time in a long time. So while Sydney may be cooling, other parts of the country are certainly not, but it's the tendency of media. A lot of our media comes out of Sydney and they tend to extrapolate the Sydney situation to the whole of Australia. They talk about low interest rates keeping the heat in the market. It's got very little to do with the level of interest rates. It's about local conditions. Hobart and Canberra are strong because the local economies are strong and infrastructure spending is strong. Perth is recovering because the Western Australian economy is becoming stronger after being weak for the past 3 or 4 years. So the article I'm looking at in News Limited also makes the point that economists had expected a much more negative result from home lending this month, which again highlights how often economists get it wrong with their predictions. I'm not sure why we ever listen to them, but whenever any statistics on any subject, whether it's retail spending, the unemployment rate, or home loan figures for the housing market come out, economists express surprise or shock or amazement because they predicted something different. They never seem to get it right. Why do we listen to these people? More authoritative is the Chief Executive Officer for Mortgage Choice, John Flavel, who points out that November is the 5th straight month that we saw more than 55,000 home loans approved around the country. So the markets remain very strong. Sydney may be winding down, but real estate generally in other parts of the country continues to be strong and continues to rise. So we have, in particular, a growing presence in the market of first home buyers, and the figures don't count the many first home buyers who choose to buy an investment property as a first purchase. So generally speaking, property market's still pretty healthy. First home buyers far more active than media would expect us to believe, because they keep telling us that the Great Australian Dream is dead. Well, clearly it's not, and the first time buyers are out there very active, putting to light to some of the claims that are being made about housing affordability and the need for drastic solutions that probably won't work anyway. This is Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again soon.